David, tracing a little history, you ran against Chris Carney back a few years ago after he had been appointed to finish out the term of Dr. Jim Forrester. And you won that election and have been the North Carolina senator from District 44 since. Now, at that time, the district, of course, included Iredell County, but the districts have been redrawn this year. And as a result, the new district includes Lincoln, Cleveland, and still the two precincts in Gaston County where Dr. Forrester lived. The biggest part of the population, of course, is in Lincoln and Cleveland counties. Tell us a little bit about your background in the North Carolina General Assembly, what things you have worked for, credentials, committees that you've served on a little bit that you think are most important. And also, you've been recognized a couple of times relative to your service there, if you will.
Well, as you said, I've been in the Senate for 6 years now. I started out on the Finance Committee, and I worked with Bob Rucho on the big tax cut bill in 2013, which has produced huge tax savings for this state. In this year alone, that 2013 tax bill is projected to generate $1.5 billion in savings to North Carolina families and businesses. And then I got moved over to the Education Committee. So for the past 4 years, I've been serving as one of the senior chairs on education appropriations and education policy. And so we have worked hard to increase funding for education. Education is by far the biggest part of the North Carolina budget. It's about 58% of the state budget. In most states, education is about 44% of the budget, because in other states, funding is funded primarily by local real estate taxes. In North Carolina, it's not. So that's why real estate taxes are so low in North Carolina, because real estate taxes do not fund education. We have increased education funding dramatically. Last year, we increased funding $700 million. We have increased teacher salaries dramatically. For the first time in history, the average teacher salary in North Carolina is more than $50,000, which is a huge achievement. We're still ranked fairly low in teacher salaries, but it's really not a fair apples-to-apples comparison. In many states, they're losing population. So they're not building new schools, they're not hiring new teachers. The only time they hire a new teacher is when a senior teacher retires. And so their pay scale is mainly senior teachers. We're growing very fast. We're now the 9th most populous state in the country. We just passed Michigan. So we're hiring thousands of new teachers who are starting off at the bottom of the pay scale, which is $35,000. So to get the average up to $50,000 is a major achievement, because we have so many $35,000 first-year teachers. In the Northeast states, they're losing population, so all of their teachers are senior teachers. So if you took off the salaries of all the teachers with 10 years or less experience in North Carolina, their average would be dramatically higher than it is. So our low standing in relative ranking of teacher salaries is not really fair. We're really paying more than it appears based on the ranking. I have worked a lot in in higher education, in the UNC system and the community college system. We're doing a lot of things to increase graduation rates and keep tuition down for our students. And in the community college level, we're working hard on workforce development, trying to match up the skills that businesses need for their employees and the skills that kids have when they get out of school. And so we're really working hard to match that up. Right now, there's a huge mismatch. We apparently have too many four-year baccalaureate degree students, because those students cannot find jobs. An interesting statistic is that the school with the most students with baccalaureate degrees in North Carolina is Wake Tech. So thousands of kids with four-year degrees are now going back to Wake Tech to get a skill that they can actually get a job with. And that's really a bad thing. They spend a lot of money in 4 years getting a degree, now they can't find a job. And so we're trying to work on that. So that's one of the major things I've been working on. The other big issue that I really have a lot of interest in is rural health care. I was co-chair of a rural health committee during the interim, and I found out some things that really bothered me. We're the 14th sickest state in the country. We're 44th in access to health care, and the reason is we can't get doctors to go out to the rural areas. We have enough doctors in North Carolina, but there's a huge maldistribution problem. All the doctors want to go to Charlotte and Raleigh and Wilmington and Greensboro and the cities. Very few doctors want to go to the rural areas because, one, they can't make as much money. Two, their highly educated spouses can't find high-paying jobs. And three, there's a perception that the quality of life is not as good out in a small town in eastern North Carolina as it is in Raleigh. And so this is beyond the scope of what the legislature can do to fix the problem. So it seems to me like the thing we need to do is to get nurse practitioners and physician's assistants to go out to those areas and provide what health care they can do within their skill set, and anything else they can refer to a physician. In my mind, there's no question that having a nurse practitioner in a small town in eastern North Carolina is vastly better than having no health care provider at all. So that's what I'm going to try to do next year, is to take the legal handcuffs off nurse practitioners and encourage them to go out into the rural areas and kind of perform the function that the old family doctor used to provide, where he takes care of the more basic health issues and then refers the more complicated health problems to a physician or to a specialist. So those are the two things I've been working on, and I plan to continue working on, is education, specifically higher education, and trying to deal with this fact that we're the 14th sickest state in the country in spite of having world-class health care in our cities.
Of course, what you just talked about is just an idea, something that you plan to work on, and you had told us about it some time ago, but you've never actually, to this date, you haven't introduced any legislation on that. However, you did introduce some legislation during the last session that related to allowing optometrists to perform certain minor functions rather than having patients have to go to an ophthalmologist in order to get some minor procedures done. And it appears from what has happened recently with a political action committee that was recently formed and has produced cable television ads and mailers attacking you and your candidacy, that those two things might be somewhat related. Do you believe that's true?
I think it probably is true, because I don't know of any other group with the financial power that this group in Raleigh has. I don't know of any other group that would come after me so specifically as this group is doing. They've spent more than $60,000 in the past 10 days, and that's a lot of money in the state Senate races. Most Senate races don't spend nearly that much money. I haven't spent that much money in my whole campaign. And when I was working on the optometry bill, it also indicated to me, it's just amazing, the optometry bill would have allowed optometrists to do 4 minor procedures in their office rather than send the patient back to the ophthalmologist to do these procedures. And just that tiny little piece of legislation would save patients thousands of dollars. And for example, the patient comes in after a cataract surgery and needs a minor laser procedure that can be done in 30 seconds. If the optometrist could do it in his office, it'd be done in 5 minutes. But now the optometrist has to say, you need a certain procedure, we're going to send you back to the ophthalmologist. So the patient has to take another day off work and get a driver to take him or her back to the ophthalmologist's office, pay another copay at the ophthalmologist's office, and basically waste a whole day to get that done. So what should have been taken care of in 5 minutes is now taking a whole day. And so that is a very minor piece of the big rural health care problem, but just that tiny little piece would save patients in North Carolina a lot of money and a lot of time. And so that kind of got me started on this whole idea of problems in rural health care. And I asked for this interim committee to be formed based on that. And the interim committee, just really opened my eyes to what a huge healthcare problem we have in North Carolina. We're 44th in access to healthcare, despite having too many physicians in the cities. So clearly the problem is out in the rural areas. And so I just think it's a travesty that we're allowing our rural citizens, 2.5 million, we have 2.5 million rural citizens, about 8 million urban citizens. Our rural citizens are dying at a 16% higher rate, and that's just a travesty. When there is a solution to the problem, then we really need to do it. And the legislature has the power to take the handcuffs off nurse practitioners and PAs and encourage them to go out to the rural areas. And I'm very hopeful that I can get that done in the long session next year.
These attack ads, one of the things that they attack you about, of course, they don't talk in those ads about that healthcare situation. They talk about taxes instead.
Right.
And of course they are very much pointing out that some changes made in the laws means that sales taxes have increased in North Carolina. They don't go into a pure comparison of how reductions in income taxes have more than offset that.
Right. Now, most voters agree that sales tax is a more fair tax than income tax. And income tax basically punishes you for working hard and earning money. So most polls show that voters and citizens feel like sales tax is more fair tax than income tax. So, and the legislature agrees. And so in the 2013 Tax Act, we cut income tax and corporate tax dramatically, and we increased sales tax on several services. They're hitting me on the sales tax increases. One mailer hit me on a sales tax on car repairs. Another hit me on sales tax on electric bills. But the flaw or the deception is that in 2018, this 2013 Act that I strongly supported is projected to cut corporate tax and personal income tax $2.3 billion. The sales tax increase is $800 million. So that's a net $1.5 billion savings to the taxpayers of North Carolina. So they're being very deceptive in just hitting me on that small sales tax increase and ignoring the huge income and corporate tax reduction that we gave the citizens in that bill. So that's just a bit frustrating that they're picking a small piece of that bill and claiming that I support increased taxes, which is absolutely false. Other states are looking at North Carolina to try to figure out how we're doing what we're doing. When the Republicans took over, this state was in a huge mess. We had budget deficits, teacher salaries were frozen, they were cutting the education budget, they had borrowed $2.5 billion from the federal government to pay unemployment benefits. Today, we've changed that 180 degrees. We've paid off that $2.5 billion debt. We now have $2 billion in a savings account. We have cut taxes to the lowest taxes in the southeast of any state that has income tax. We had a $600 million budget surplus last year. We're projected to have between $300 and $400 million budget surplus this year. We have very low unemployment, and so we have turned this state around. And I'm really proud of the job the Republican legislature has done in the past 6 years, because we have done a lot of really good things for the citizens of North Carolina.
I think Forbes magazine recently recognized North Carolina as what it said was the most business-friendly state in the nation.
Right, and they based that on two criteria. One is our low corporate income tax, and two, we have gotten rid of hundreds or thousands of regulations that are costly to businesses, and the cost doesn't justify the benefit. So the fact that we cut regulations dramatically, which allows companies to make much more profit than they did in the past, and then they're paying much lower taxes on that profit that they're earning. And so that's why Forbes magazine ranks us as the most business-friendly state in the country, because of the reg reform and the low taxes.
in detailing some of your activities in committee, you did not mention, I will go back and ask again, you have been recognized for your voting record in the General Assembly.
Yeah, the National Right to Life has endorsed me. The National Rifle Association has endorsed me. Several business organizations have recognized me as being very pro-business. And so being pro-business and pro-family, I've been recognized by several organizations for being business-friendly and being pro-life. And I have tried to move North Carolina in a more conservative direction socially. So several organizations have recognized me for those efforts. One of the other things that I'm really proud of that the legislature did was take politics out of the transportation budget. For decades, powerful politicians could get beautiful four-lane roads built in their district whether it was needed or not. And for decades, the eastern part of the state controlled North Carolina politics. So if you go out east, there's these beautiful four-lane roads where there's almost no traffic on. And they're there because the powerful politician in that area, got $200 million to spend on that road. And so that is just really bad politics. So we passed a law that takes politics out of transportation. Every transportation project has to be scored on a transparent, objective scale. And once these projects are scored, they're funding based on the score. The one with the highest score gets funded first. So Senator Berger cannot now get a major road project built in Rockingham County because he's the President Pro Tem of the Senate. Every project has to go through that scoring process. So that's going to move, billions of dollars to the right places where it's really needed for the most public good, not where the powerful politicians live. And so that's not talked about very much, but that is really a big deal, and it's going to go a long way toward helping solve our huge infrastructure problem here in North Carolina.